of us who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent.
Thanks so much, Jed. So before giving the floor to Surranna, I would like to give you a very, very brief description of our program, the Black Community Access Program and Strategic Initiatives, which is the host or which is a program that runs this specific Women on the Rise project. I am not going to take any more time, but I just would like to give you, because we do have multiples of programs that may be beneficial to your contacts or anyone whom you would like to refer to us. So one of the programs is the program that we are running currently, the Women on the Rise on Data Analytics and Training, Data Analytics and Leadership Program, which is open for Black women who are interested in data analytics and leadership. We have the BLI, the Black Leadership Institute. This is a program that's completely leadership, so it's open for all Black people who are interested in aspiring leadership careers and skills. We do have also a program that is beneficial to entrepreneurs and startups. That program is for all the programs that I'm talking about are open only for Black people. So the entrepreneurship program is giving a skills training on entrepreneurship, financial management, and everything in business leadership. We do have also youth programs on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and also entrepreneurship for youth. So those programs are open to Black youth. Therefore, anyone whom you might believe that benefiting from these different programs, you may refer to me, you may refer to Jade, or to anyone at Skills for Change, so that they will benefit from those programs. I am so happy that everybody is here, and I will pass the floor to Surranna.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Surranna Sandy, and I'm the CEO of Skills for Change. And I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'm happy to talk about Skills for Change, our program, and to introduce a fantastic group of panelists. Before I do that, I really want to say thank you to the TD Ready commitment for the financial support of the Women on the Rise project. We're very excited to have this initiative. And as Stella indicated, and Stella is a manager of our BCAP department, a Black community access program in Department of Skills for Change has a multiplicity of project initiatives available for the Black community as part of Skills for Change services. Skills for Change is a 40-year-old registered charity, and we work with immigrants and refugees. The social uprising in 2020, the murder of Mr. George Floyd, the broader awareness of anti-Black racism that are brought forward really helped us to center in our programming specific to the Black community and to develop the Black, Stella didn't mention one really new project we just got funding for, which is part of Black Youth Action Plan funded by the province of Ontario. And he touched a little bit on that STEM project, but it's for youth 14 to 18. And I want to center that just a little bit because we really want to, get our Black youth connected to programming in technology and science and math and engineering. And we're very excited to launch that. And of course, we have youth entrepreneurship in addition to the adult entrepreneurship. Today, we recognize the importance of having conversations to unlock the Black women experience and our contributions as Black women to Canada broadly. And for Skills for Change, we're very honored to have our panelists today from very different leadership positions in their own field who are opening up themselves to share their wisdom and experiences with us today. So I want to really thank all the panelists for joining us and each of you, our attendees, for taking the time to be with us this morning. As we go forward, I'm sure you may have questions that come up. Please feel free to put those questions in the chat. My colleagues will be monitoring those and we'll be able to bring those questions to our panelists. So we have a wonderful group with us. We have Dr. Cheryl Thompson, who is an assistant professor and an author. She's assistant professor at Toronto Metropolitan University. And she's joining us today. Thank you so much for doing that. We have Kimberly Nesbeth. She's a founder and policy advisor of Elevate Policy. And Kimberly is a community and human rights focused policy advisor and social entrepreneur. We have Esther Enyolu. She's a founder and executive director of Women's Multicultural Resource and Counseling Center in Durham. Thank you, Esther, for being with us this morning. And we have Jodi-Ann Campbell, who is the founder and CEO of Malcolm Schools. And Jodi-Ann is a founder, as I mentioned, but also she's a local community advocate who is really focused on spreading awareness on Black businesses across Canada. So good morning again to our panelists and welcome. I'll just like to take, before we get into our questions, if you could take just 1 minute each and just tell us a bit about your leadership story. So I'm going to start with Dr. Thompson. Just tell us about your experience as a Black woman in leadership.
Yes, thank you so much. It's interesting because you often don't think you're a leader until somebody calls you one. At least in my case, like I just sort of leaned into that title. It's important to know for me, I am an academic. So Dr. Thompson is what people call me. But the truth is that I've worked in multiple fields before I became an academic. I've been in the business sector. I've been a freelance worker. I've been a gig worker. I've just done a bunch of stuff. And so for me, the way I view leadership is actually being self-directed. That's kind of how my leadership is self-directed, because the truth is you don't become an academic unless you have self-direction, because there's no template. There's no template in Canada for multi-generational academics. Most Black academics in Canada are probably first generation. So we don't have a path. So you have to create it. So for me, a lot of the way I lead is from, my sister always says, nobody wants to be the last wolf in the pack. Right? And that's just the truth, because if you're the last wolf, your picture never changes. Your view never changes. It's only when you're at the front that your view actually changes, because you're seeing what's happening first. So that's kind of how I've approached leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I like, don't be the last leader in the pack. Thank you. Kimberly, what are your thoughts as a Black woman generally?
Yeah, a really interesting question. And similar to what Dr. Thompson said, I haven't necessarily thought of myself as a leader like throughout my career and in the past, but I think it's come out of necessity. And so, I've been working as a policy analyst or policy advisor for a number of years now. And there isn't often a leadership path in that field if you're a policy analyst, unless you're in an organization and you're able to climb, like, for example, in government. That's usually where that leadership space is, if you're able to, sort of go up through the ranks, as they say. But I've just felt like I had a different voice and a different contribution to make. And I especially wanted to connect my policy work to communities specifically, and in particular to anti-racism policy, which is where I'm focusing now. And so that's really why I created my own space through Elevate Policy, so that I'm able to really be my, just my real authentic self, and to share my voice, with community and through community, and not so much focus on government only, although of course that's important in the policy world, but really helping to, share the voices of community members and to share what our priorities are. And so that's why I've connected to anti-racism. And that's how I feel like my voice has been connected with leadership. And that's been my leadership path. And really to be an entrepreneur as well. That's been the way to create a space where I can really be myself as a policy advisor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kimberly. And Esther, what has been your leadership journey? You want to give us some context there? Oh, Esther, you're on mute.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes. Okay. Great leaders always look for new ideas, strategies, and approaches to do their work. They keep up with the new trends, especially in technology to keep up with the ever-changing world. In terms of my leadership skills or being a leader, actually, just like the other colleagues say, you don't see yourself as a leader. You just see yourself as somebody passionate doing what you do. But it is everybody will be throwing to you, your leadership, your leadership. Then you sit back and start saying, what am I doing for them to be commenting your leadership? A leader is always there to support others that they lead. And I try to do that in my capacity as a leader, supporting, motivating people, mentoring, coaching people, and putting the good policies, programs and services and good practices in the work that we do. As you know, my agency, Women's Multicultural Resource and Counseling Center of Durham, is an organization working with Blacks, racialized, immigrants, newcomer, women of all ages, youth and children who experience violence. We also provide programs for women in business. We develop cooperative programs for women. So you, as a leader, you always have to keep brainstorming, coming with ideas, and also consulting with people that you lead, and people also, because the structure of our charity non-for-profit, as you know also, is you have to have a volunteer board of directors. You have to work with all these parties in making decisions and helping you in whatever you're doing, the decisions you're making within the organization. So the leadership is not entirely on you. It involves every entity, every stakeholders within the organization to make things perfect or to make things effectively, and also to make sure that we are delivering effective services and programs to the individuals, members of our community. So my leadership is transformational leadership that is encouraging other people, supporting other people, mentoring them. And as a leader, you know, you enjoy the benefit of both worlds. There are when things are good. So as a leader, we should never shy away when there is a problem, feel comfortable to give people constructive feedback. And the way it is brought to people matters. So, but as a leader, we should always be upfront with people, be honest with people, give people constructive feedback. And also as a leader, I welcome to receive that, because no man or no woman is an island. It goes two ways. You give constructive feedback. You also want to receive constructive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. And Jodi-Ann, what is your story? And tell us a bit about your journey as a Black woman in leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, I'd like to say good morning to everybody. I feel so happy to be here and to follow such great leaders before me. And I would like to echo the ladies that went before me, as you never really do think of yourself as a leader. But for my journey, I would say that my journey is really based on my passion for my community and my passion for business. And I've been able to kind of transform that passion into this business. And so as an entrepreneur, I like to say that, you know, you're a leader because you are innovating and you're creating something that wasn't there before. And I think that is really the journey that I've taken myself. But I don't know if I think of myself as a leader fully just yet, because I am in the trenches, so to speak, with everybody else. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm building a business, and I think as a leader, you need to lead by doing, and to kind of have that example of what you're doing first. To lean on and be able to give that insight to the people that are looking to you for guidance, for inspiration. And sometimes you don't even know that you're inspiring people just on your journey. But as you continue to grow and to learn, then you then develop yourself into a better leader and able to better direct people on their own path and their own journey. So like myself, I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I think as a leader, you have to always want to learn and have that thirst for knowledge. And that's why I always make sure that I am present in rooms like this with wonderful women like the leaders that came before me, but also just to learn and be able to be a better leader and to contribute to the community in that way.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your, your viewpoint of how you view yourself in leadership and the impact that you're making. And as we think about that, and we have folks in here who are coming from different spaces, whether in corporate or community or just for, the next journey, where is the place of Black women in the Canadian business leadership space? Like, what do you think is important here? What have you experienced? And just give us some context. And I'll start with Dr. Thompson.
Yeah, so what's important for women, Black women, especially entering like the business world or the nonprofit, whatever it is? I mean, the first thing that I know from my own personal experience, it can be challenging when you are the only one. Like that silence that comes with being the only person who looks like you in the room. And it's not just about your skin. It's not the surface of the skin. It's how you think. So your thoughts are actually different. So when you speak up in a meeting, you're always the one saying something that's different. And then when it's different, it gets challenged. And then you're like, why doesn't anyone have my back in here? And it's because they don't think like you. And I think that was for me in my journey, the most startling thing that I had to learn to overcome. Like I had to learn to adapt to the fact that every time I raise my hand to speak, somebody in that room is going to be like, I don't agree with you. And you're thinking, but I didn't ask you to agree. We're actually just brainstorming ideas. I didn't know that the ideas were about agreement. And then you step back and you think, you know what? If I'm actually going to be successful in this space, I have to be strategic when I share my ideas. And that's what I started to do for my own journey. I was strategic. I wouldn't share my ideas with people who were, as soon as I spoke, they're ready to take notes. I shared my ideas with people when I spoke. They said, come to my office, I'd like to hear more. That's the person that I would then reveal myself to. So I think part of it is being kind of strategic in terms of who you talk to and who you share your thoughts with. It's not just about showing up. And I think sometimes the narrative on Black and racialized women in the business world is just, oh, just show up. No. It literally, for me, is about who you talk to and who you let into your inner self. Right. And I think that is the sort of it's like a tightrope that I have experienced over my career in the business world and also in the academic space too.
I thank you. And Jodi-Ann, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, I would say that it's important in the business world as a Black woman to find your tribe, to find out who is there for you and who you can connect with. And I think that's kind of what I always lean into, whether that be in my business or whatever space I happen to be in. I find out who is in that space, who is for me, who has similar thoughts, just like Dr. Thompson just said, who thinks like me, and who is going to help me to kind of push my initiatives forward and be strategic in that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that whole point of, making sure that you're very careful what you're sharing, but also build that productive relationship. Kim, what are your thoughts on the role of Black women in leadership in Canadian business here?
Yeah, and I want to also just say that I totally agree with Dr. Thompson and Jodi-Ann have been saying, and that's been a part of, I think, the biggest learning curve for me as sort of someone who's earlier in my career and who's new to the entrepreneurship world, just learning how to strategically place myself and who I connect with and let into my inner world, because there is a lot of vulnerability involved in this type of work, especially, we talk about wanting to share our voice and put ourselves out there, but that is a really vulnerable space. And sometimes we're not received with warmth. And so just building up that inner, it's inner strength, but also boundaries informed by self-love. That's another part of my journey as well, like self-love really guiding the way for me, and understanding where I'm best placed in terms of my work and my voice. That's been the biggest learning curve for me. And so it's really great to hear that other people are having this experience, that I'm not alone. I mean, I want us to all have, wonderful experiences, but this is a part of the work, right? And it's good to talk about these kinds of things and shine a light on it, because it builds community and builds, strength in this way. But something else that came to mind around the question of our place in the business landscape, I feel like it's increasingly wherever we want to be. And I think that also comes out of self-love and understanding that we don't have to be in those roles and those places that society have kind of dictated for us in many ways. And so, understanding our real selves, our authentic selves through self-love, I feel like for me, it's helped me to understand that I can, kind of break out of that mold and be an entrepreneurial policy advisor who's a Black woman, first generation immigrant from Jamaica, who, isn't always like the cultural differences. I still feel them, even though I grew up here in Toronto. And so, yeah, that self-love has really helped me to understand that I can be, where I want to be. I can work in an organization, or I can work independently, in my consulting practice, which is what I've been doing for the past couple of years, on and off. So yeah, that's I think a really key thing to keep in mind as well.
I love that. I think that's important, because I love everything so far, because it's important for us to recognize you can be anywhere and do anything. There are no limitations, right? You should say, well, Black people don't do that, or Black, well, of course we do. We can do whatever we want. So I appreciate you making sure that we could reinforce the criticality of considering a project, a job, a sector, industry, where you may be the first or the only one, but you have a right to be there and to explore that. Esther, what are your thoughts in following on our colleagues here?
Thank you so much, my colleagues, Jodi-Ann, Kim, and Cheryl, for your insights. For me too, Black women are everywhere, and in Canadian business leadership spaces. Some of us are teachers, some of us are nurses, so our healthcare providers. Some are CEOs, executive director, administrator, technologists, politicians, policing and law enforcement, business owners, entrepreneurs, and on various boards. For me, it is always important to create your support network. When I go to all those coalitions, committee meetings, or different places, I find people who can connect to me, people who support me, and sometimes everybody is not welcoming to you or welcoming to what you have to say, or your opinions, or the way you do your work. Because as a feminist, anti-racist, anti-oppression worker, or lenses, working from this lens, my view is quite different from most people's view. And when you express those views, not everybody welcomes it. People, it can be setting yourself up for attack. So you have to find how to mitigate that. And also, as people, as a Black woman, or as a woman working from this lens, you are quite different from most people. So we should not shy away or be saying, we are here to do the work. As long as you are not putting anybody down, as long as you are not saying anything that is damaging or unacceptable, but we have to do the work. That's why we are in the field. The perspective that we bring, the way we do things, it is important to share it with people. So we should not shy away. You refer to 2020, what happened with the uprising with Black Lives Matter. So we have a duty to educate the community on certain issues. So we need not to shy away. So when I belong to those committees and groups, I bring those lenses to those committees with the hope that I will do my part in educating people on those issues.
Thank you, Esther. And and talking about that, there was so much corporate conversations and policies and new positions in diversity and commitments since the murder of Mr. George Floyd, and a real global focus on Black Lives Matter, and including the protests that we saw, in 2020 and before and since. And with this company pledges, have you seen any noticeable changes? Are we doing enough? Are they doing enough to, especially around getting Black women in leadership roles or creating space for Black women in organizations to lead and to grow? I'll start with you, Dr. Thompson.
I'm actually going to answer this question with a story, because I actually like telling stories. It's kind of part of my teaching. Some students like it, some don't. But 2020, this company reaches out to me and says, oh, you seem like a Black woman in leadership. We'd really be interested in having a conversation about you joining our board. And I thought, okay, let me look to the company. I look up the company, it's all white. I thought, okay. And it's in a product line that I'm like, okay, this is not really a match. And then we get on a Zoom call and I meet the CEO, and he's like, selling the position with the perks. So I'm going to get this money. I'm going to get a expense paid trip twice a year to meet the shareholders and this and this. And then the whole time I'm thinking, why am I here? Am I here because it's 2020 and George Floyd and you need a Black person now because the board is all white? Like, that's pretty much what I surmised in that half an hour conversation. And then I think I might have asked him, why did you contact me? And his response was, oh, well, I'm on LinkedIn and Wes Hall is a good friend of mine. And I saw that you liked a post and then I went to your website. Does that seem like a serious vetting of a person to join your board? And I would say to you, that's what happened in 2020. These companies were not serious. They were just looking for some shiny Black person that maybe they saw in the media, or maybe they read something, or maybe somebody referred you, and then suddenly they're like, oh yeah, look around, oh yeah, the board is lily white. We need I don't mean to say this, but it seemed like we need a Negro. That's what 2020 was. And that conversation with that person was so offensive. Of course, he's like, oh, we'll get in touch. I never even heard from them again. And I just let that go because it was just everything about it was token. And I think what's happened since 2020, to be fair, there are some corporate organizations that I feel were serious because they put a team together that was a multi-ethnic team led by Black women or men, right? The team doing the work was led by us with white allies on board. Those organizations, serious, but I would say 80% of it was a lot of performative allyship.
And thank you for that. I reflecting on it, I do have similar thoughts too, and I'll hold those for a moment, but I want to hear from Jodi-Ann and your experience and your reflection on what has occurred since 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my view is that really, I don't think there needs to be a trigger or an event that happens for us to start advocating for Black people or anti-Black racism or anything like that. And I think that the fact that we saw all of these corporate industries just jumping onto that opportunity, I think that is where the flaw is, right? Isn't this something that they should be thinking about like all the time? It should be a constant thread of something. How is our company relating to Black people, Black women? What are we doing for them as a community? Or, it shouldn't be a trigger that starts them to start thinking in that way. And I think that's my main problem with what happened in 2020, that it was like, okay, somebody has died and now we need to do it. And I think that it needs to be like, no, this is something that is happening all the time. This is the Black experience in our country, right? And we need to always be conscious of who we have representing a specific demographic on our board. It should be a conscious thought or a conscious thing that each company should be doing. So that's my main problem with what occurred in 2020. And again, just to echo what Dr. Thompson said, a lot of tokenism. Like we need a Black person on our board. We need to add some color to our board of directors so we don't look like we're out of step or not in lockstep with what's happening with the society right now. So I think that's where the real change needs to be. I did see a lot of people getting new diversity and inclusion positions, et cetera, like that. Yeah, which is, I'm like, okay, so a new industry has been birthed out of this, but I don't know if that's really what the aim or the goal was. And I don't know if these companies are continuing even to go through this effort now that it's no longer trendy, or it's no longer top of the news or top of mind. Now, is that something that they're still focused on, or is that had now fallen to the wayside and on the back burner now? And when the next trigger happens is when we'll see that new rush of people wanting to hire and see Black people represented on their boards, et cetera. That's my thought.
Thank you both. It's interesting around that because, I was listening to something where racial equity group in the UK, they had a panel and they were talking about, what has occurred in the last 2 years and any shift and changes. And really is similar sort of conclusion. It was somewhat performative. We hope that it sticks through. And then, bringing up the notion of I don't think there was even an exploration of the diversity of the Black community itself. The diaspora is very different. The experiences, the cultural context from someone who's maybe from the Caribbean or someone from the continent or North America is very different. And just that one Black person to speak for all Black people just isn't, it's not what would work. But that being said, Kim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and Surranna, Dr. Thompson, Jodi-Ann, I agree with all of you, as well. Particularly around the aspects on the performative nature of some of the actions that we've seen since 2020 and the tokenism. I think there are definitely trends that we can identify, right? So it'll be good to keep an eye on those things as we go forward. My focus is on anti-racism, particularly in the public policy sense, but also organizational policy. And what I've noticed is that there have been a lot of statements put out by organizations around commitments to anti-racism. Like, this is something that has piqued my interest, especially, and was also, it happened in a previous workplace that I was in a while ago. And so you, as a person who identifies, as a Black woman, you see anti-racism statements, you feel like, okay, this could be a better place for me, to work. It may be more inclusive, more of a focus on equity and anti-racism itself. But what I've seen is that the statements aren't always translating into action, as I think a lot of us have been getting the sense about. We're not seeing strategic initiatives around anti-racism in organizations for the most part. Like, I know there are definitely organizations that are going that way, but in terms of what I've observed as a policy analyst, haven't been seeing anti-racism being embedded into strategy, into governance, into organizational culture as well, into the corporate policies that are in organizations and that make up organizations. And so that's been something that's quite disappointing. But I understand also that these things take time, right? And because institutional racism, systemic racism are so deeply ingrained in the society, we can imagine, and we do see the resistance to this type of change that a lot of us are trying to bring forward and speak up about, and that the movements around anti-racism and Black Lives Matter have been trying to bring forward. So the resistance is taking place, and I think it will take time to really create those more sustainable approaches to anti-racism and just inclusion and equity, and particularly through things like anti-racism policy analysis, which is what I focus on in my work. I think that's a good tool that can be used in terms of policymaking within organizations to make anti-racism more deeply ingrained and more meaningful for people in organizations.
Yeah, and also as they do anti-racism work, if they can just go a little bit further and do anti-Black racism work, because it's a little bit different that as we all experience, at some point, the difference with how anti-Black racism plays out in our lives, socially and economically. So it's important. Esther, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, My colleagues, co-panelists, they have said so much. They covered everything that I have to say, but I need to add more. We all witnessed what happened in 2020, following that uprising with Black Lives Matter, George Floyd murder, and so many of the people who passed on due to brutality. Most of the institutions and companies, everywhere you turn, they were hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion everywhere. So go back to find out what happened since then. Are those positions still there? So we need to be proactive than reactive. So we are reacting, but this has been happening all along. It didn't just start in 2020 because it was brought out then. So that's why everybody was running around looking to hire DEI manager, DEI director. So those companies need to look at their policy. Everything starts with policy and procedure of an organization. You have to review your policies. You have to make sure that anti-Black racism, anti-racism, anti-Indigenous racism, anti-oppression are embedded, incorporated in your organization's policy. And not only being in policies, to be put into practice. Because most of the times, people will tell you they have this policy, they have this document, but when you look at the structure, when you observe how they conduct their business, you don't see it. So people need to incorporate all those analysis, incorporate all those issues into the organization's policies and procedures, and make sure it is practice, it is put into practice, so that everybody, irrespective of your social location, you come in that environment, you will feel welcome. You will feel, oh, this is an environment that I can work and feel safe and be myself. And also, just like Dr. Thompson was saying, she was being approached, a lot of us, we are also being approached by companies. So they want to present, oh, we have this person who is this, from this community as a representative. But when they recruit you as a lone individual, you have to deal with all these people. And you will be the tokenism among all those people, and your voice cannot be heard. So it is good. It is a good practice, or the best practice, not to recruit only one person, recruit many others, so that that person will have support network within the organization, not to be as a tokenism. And sometimes when people are tokenism, I know some people who are in position and they say, yes, I am in that position, but I cannot make decision, because any decision that I present, because it is only me, it will not move along, because everybody will not go with it. So we need to strategize the best way to do things that will be more sustainable, that would work for us. So, and what I will recommend is not to be reactive, but to be proactive. Be consistent with something, not because this happened all of a sudden, we are doing this. Just like our organization, Women's Multicultural Resource and Counseling Center of Durham, from the inception of the organization in 1993, we incorporated all this. WMRCC is a feminist, anti-racist, anti-oppressive organization. Doing this, we have never diverted from that. It was embedded in our structure from the onset we started. I know back in those years, people were not familiar with diversity, equity, inclusion. And in those years, oh, now we are using diversity, equity, and inclusion because people don't want to hear anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, Islamophobia. People don't want all those. Oh, diversity, equity, inclusion, it is a better name. And I know our organization also does anti-Black racism. Sometimes when people invite us to do training, they will tell us the language they want us to use. Do not use anti-racism, anti-Black racism, anti-oppression. Use cultural competence. So they tell you the language that their team members will be more comfortable hearing than you saying anti-Black, anti-racism, anti-oppression. So it is something that we all need to work hard to maintain, to sustain. That's the only way out. And it is our duty to educate the community, to raise awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. That was fantastic. And, the idea of, say it this way because you don't want to make people uncomfortable. Well, it is uncomfortable, and you must be able to have this difficult conversation. If we have to soften it, frame it somewhere, then you're not ready. And that's an issue. I have, before I go to questions from the attendees, I'll have another question. So Dr. Thompson, what are some of the resources and tools you've used to really build up your leadership practice and your leadership journey? What would you want to share with?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kim was the one who said it, self-care. I mean, there's so many things that I do before I even leave the house, like, and it's funny because I had this conversation I've been having this conversation all semester with the students that I'm teaching. And one of the things I keep saying to them is, whatever you expect to happen will, right? So your expectations of yourself is literally what is going to be shown to you. And you'd be shocked to know how many people expect to fail, expect to be treated poorly, expect no one to listen to them. And then when it happens, they come complaining to you. Nobody's listening to me, but you expected that. So part of my strategy is, and the truth is, when I was younger, I think people interpreted this as cockiness, because I've actually always been this way, even from when I was a small child. I expect people to listen to me. I've always had that expectation. And the funny thing is, or the blessing I should say, is that I always had a mother who did. So I expect my mother to always listen to me, and she always did. And when she doesn't, I call her out on it. Even to this day, if I'm on the phone with my mother, I say, "You're not listening. I'm going to call you back." I stop the conversation. And think about, in that instance, it sounds like a meaningless interaction, but no, it's because I have that standard for myself. I expect to be listened to. And if it's not happening, I remove myself until it can happen. So what that means is I center that respect for myself in everything. And I think often what happens is you let that go. You're like, oh, it's not realistic that people are going to listen to you all the time. Why is that not realistic? That's not a world that I want to live in, right? If you're not able to listen to me at this moment, then let's reconnect when you can, right? So it's about being clear about yourself and what your needs, I would call it almost a self-needs assessment, right? And often we don't do that. Another thing that I also need is that when you are listening to me, I need a response from you. How many times we go and we're speaking, if you're speaking in front of a crowd, "Good morning, everyone," crickets. You're like, was that not a good morning that you wanted them to react? And they don't react. And I can't tolerate that. If I say hi, I expect you to say hi. And if you don't, I call you out on it. So what I'm saying to you is that my expectation in everything that I do is that when I give you something, I think it was Esther who said this, I expect an exchange in return. I'm not just going to give into an empty well. And so many people give into an empty well, and then they go into their reserve, giving into that empty well, and then they start to get sick. And then they want to blame the other person, right? My partner doesn't listen to me. Well, maybe you need to demand that they do. And if they don't, then that's a conversation, is what I'm saying to you. And I think it was Esther who also recently said this, these are very tough conversations. Like, what I'm saying to you is that I set a standard that means you're going to get into conflict with people. people are not going to like that you're living your life this way. And so that's the conversation that we never really have about what to do when you choose you and it causes conflict in your life. I mean, we have to go on, but I think that's something that even the attendees should really think about, because when you do set boundaries, there are going to be some losses. And how do you cope with those changes when they happen?
And I love the idea of, you think of resources. Initially, we may think of all the leadership books we can consume, but the first thing is take care of yourself. Take care of yourself and build expectations of from your interactions, what you want from them. I really appreciate that. Jodi-Ann, what are your
Please, before we move on, I
Mhm.
want to add something to what Dr. Thompson just said. Yes, yes, thank you for sharing that, because that was true. As I was saying to you, when we first started back in 1993, we do workshops, we invite community, we talk in this language. And people, we are wondering, the analysis you're bringing to them, because they haven't seen anybody talking in that way, and you are bringing this to them. They were feeling uncomfortable. They were feeling you were attacking them. They were feeling you were calling them racist. And one woman said to me, Esther, are you calling us all racist? I said to her, we are not calling you all racist, but we are trying to present the analysis that we work when we are working with people, especially people from certain communities. So that's not, we are trying to raise community awareness. So right now, everybody is using that analysis. Everybody is expert. So diversity, equity, inclusion is a sexy word today. But back in those days, it was like, everybody was like getting pushed, like, what is this? What is this anti-racist, anti-this? So thank you, sorry about that.
No, Esther, thank you so much. If you're changing the language, but it doesn't help to deal with the issue that we're facing, and you soften it to please yourself, but not to solve the problem. That's an interesting thing that's happening, right? Jodi-Ann, as you go through your leadership journey as a Black woman, what are the resources that you've utilized to help enhance your leadership practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like to answer to this is the community. My community is what I use as a resource. So my company, Malcolm's Choice, we're a Black-owned business directory. And so because of that, I have access to a lot of people who are experts in their respective fields. So I always say to the business owners that are in the directory that I'm not the expert, you are the expert, and I want to take the knowledge from you because you've already done the work to make yourself an expert in that field, whatever the focus might be. And I just lean into that. That person already knows. I think that a lot of times people are competing with people, but instead of competing, I like to collaborate mostly. So using the community as a resource, I collaborate with each person, find out what their this is a new term that I'm using that somebody used with me, but what is their zone of genius? And then tap into their zone of genius, right? Because it's their genius, right? So let them express to me or teach me or impart on me the knowledge that they want to share with me from that zone. And then I take the pieces with me that I can from that, rather than me trying to be the expert or me trying to be the number one person in whatever we might be doing. I'd much rather lean on the community and lean on the people that are around me and use that to better my leadership journey and better myself as a leader.
All right, thank you. I love that. Community, leaning into that community. Fantastic. Thank you. And Kim, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, first I want to just say, thanks again for bringing us together for this conversation, because just hearing the other panelists talk about their experiences, it just reminds me that we're all having a lot of common similar experiences in our leadership and work and, in business, in, academia, in nonprofit spaces as well. And it's really important to, keep coming together so that we can, build community around this and really help to elevate, each other, as we're doing this work. So it's just really good to hear everyone talking about their experiences. But again, I do want to turn to self-love as the main resource that has really helped me to transition into an independent, policy analyst, like leadership kind of space, because that wasn't something that I saw anywhere really around me previously. And I just had this journey of asking myself why that was and why I thought I could step into that space. And self-love has really helped me to do that. And that has really been about, all the, the respect and love that I give, other people, around me, like turning that to myself and really taking time to understand myself, understand what my authentic voice sounds like figuratively, but also literally, like, being okay with hearing my own voice, like being recorded and on video, being okay with, making posts on social media about my work and helping to just have a place in what I think of as an anti-racism movement. And a lot of that has come from self-love work that I've been doing over the past few years. And going back even further than that, a big resource that helps me is really thinking about the experiences of my ancestors, particularly my West African Black ancestors who were in Jamaica, during the most extreme times of colonialism, and thinking about what they experienced and how I can help to bring some healing and love and justice to that entire community, and especially Black women in those communities. You can just imagine, actually it's really hard to imagine, but some of us have read about it, and the really extremely challenging lives that they had, and thinking about how I can help to heal some of that. Really, it's been intergenerational trauma that has come from a lot of those experiences. Of course, they shared a lot of love as well in their communities, and they've been bringing that forward to us, but there's been a lot of trauma. And so I've been thinking about self-love in terms of healing and trying to do the things that they weren't able to do in those times, like in terms of being a policy advocate and being able to go to school in certain ways, and to be able to connect with other women in their communities and to put their voices out there. And so that's been a big part of what fuels me in doing this work as well, and just being okay with being a leader, because it's not always welcomed, as we've been discussing, but it's definitely something that I think our ancestors would be happy to see and proud of, and would want us to continue. So that's what really helps me in this work.
Thank you. I really appreciate you taking a moment to reflect on our ancestors and all of the sacrifices that they've made, all that they went through, and here we are surviving and pushing forward. And I think that's fantastic. So thank you for doing that. Before I wrap up, I just want each of you just take a minute and just to say, what bit of advice would you give to, current Black women who are in leadership and those who are aspiring to leadership roles and leadership opportunities? What would be your advice that you want to give? So start with Dr. Thompson.
Actually, no, maybe we can start with Esther.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I can go last this time.
Absolutely.
We can go the opposite.
Esther, what do you advice you would give?
Thank you, my sister, Dr. Thompson, because I'm looking at the scenario, that's what we talk about and the work we do. We need to be fair to ourselves, we are Black women talking about ourselves. We need to be conscious how we treat everybody. Okay, so thank you for interjecting, Dr. Thompson. Well, in this role, I am a mentor. As I said to you, I'm a leader who doesn't shy away. I tell people as it is, and I call people on things, and not because I dislike you, but we have to do things the way it's supposed to be, that it is fair to people. We have to do things because that's why we are leaders, and we manage people. We have to, people always say to me, whether you are white, Black, South Asia, Middle Eastern, Latino, anybody works for me. And people say, Esther, okay, this Canadian woman, white woman was in a shelter, and I was going there to see her. And the staff there, they were so amazed how I invested my time coming there, seeing her, and among every places this woman has gone for service. She thought highly of me and all those things. And the staff there said to me, oh, Esther, you know, I said to them, you know what? We are committed to providing effective, appropriate services to the community, irrespective of your social location. So that's so because she's a white woman coming to Black racialized institution, we will treat her differently. No, that is not it. Anybody who comes to us like gets that one-on-one special treatment. So that's the way. So for the young women, I will advise them, okay, be yourself. Do not let people to intimidate you. Do not let people to put you down. You have to have great boundaries, and you have to know who is your supporter and who is not your supporter. You don't need that person in your life. You can do better with without that person. You see, you work with some young women or some young men, they are dealing with their parents. It's like what? You will listen to the conversation. You will say, what? You will ask them, who are you talking to? They say, my mom. And you will be wondering, why should a mom be damaging a child, talking to the child like that? So you will see, even when some women going through separation from their spouses, they turn to the family, their family will be the ones who will criminalize them more than any other person. I will say to them, you know what? They are not support networks. So stop discussing any issue pertaining your separating from your partner with them, because they are not support, they are doing more damage to you. Listen to people like us, service providers who are there holding your hand, trying to help you to navigate, go through what you're doing. So that's what I will say to young women. And believe in yourself. It is only you. If some of us, like Dr. Jean Augustine, Oprah, Michelle Obama, could make it, you can also make it. So believe in yourself. Even the road might not be straightforward. It's a bumpy road, but keep going, don't give up. Things will finally come together. All these millionaires, billionaires we know today, if they tell you their life stories, how they started, they didn't become millionaire overnight. Some of them we are doing cleaning jobs. Some of them we are washing dishes. Some of them we are doing odd jobs. Some of them try so many things that fail, yet they didn't give up. They continue to try more until they finally arrive to where they are. So I always, as I say it, my team members, students, volunteers, I always say to them, you know, even though I am the executive director, but do not look at me as being up there. I level up with everybody. I will give you constructive feedback. Please bring constructive feedback to me as well. So that's what I will say to young women. When you see yourself as being powerful, even though you have no money, even though you have no education, even though you look at yourself, I'm nobody, but you are powerful, your inner strength for being you. So that's what I'm saying to young women. Be yourself and try for higher. So thank you.
Thank you. We're at 12:02, and I gotta say we could end on that because that you were just Esther. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for passing the baton.
But that's why I said I think Esther can wrap this up. I felt that energy.
Thank you. And this was fantastic. You know, as myself here listening to each and every one of you, Jodi-Ann, Kim, Esther, Cheryl. Thank you for opening yourselves up and sharing so much today. I've benefited greatly from your knowledge and your thoughts today, and taking those away as I continue to do my work. And I hope that everyone who joined us this morning, now afternoon, was able to take something valuable. Thank you to TD Ready Commit for sponsoring and funding our project for Women on the Rise. Thank you to Stella and Jade and the team here at Skills for Change. And again to our panelists, Jodi-Ann Campbell, Kim Nesbeth, Esther Enyolu, and Dr. Cheryl Thompson. Thank you so much for your thoughts, energy, and passion that came through for the work and for yourselves. And I wish you all the very best as you navigate all the different spaces within which you operate as Black women, being vulnerable, but you also focus on being passionate and leading with joy and passion. And of course, leaning into self-care, which is really, really critical as you do important work. All of our work is important and valuable. Take care of yourselves as you do that. So thank you, everybody. And I wish you a great rest of your day and week, and happy holidays and happy Kwanzaa to everybody. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.